Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about a serious and sensitive topic that has drawn international attention: Lukashenko's authority being challenged by his own army. This situation is not just about one leader or one country, but about power, loyalty, fear, and the limits of control in a modern state. For decades, Alexander Lukashenko has ruled Belarus with a firm grip. Often described as Europe's last strongman, he built his authority on a mix of security forces, political repression, and carefully managed loyalty within the state. The army has always been a crucial pillar of that system, seen as disciplined, obedient, and firmly under presidential command. However, recent developments suggest that this once solid pillar may be showing cracks. Reports of dissatisfaction within the military, quiet resistance, and reluctance to fully support certain orders have raised serious questions about the strength of Lukashenko's authority. Even small signs of hesitation inside an army can be dangerous for a leader who relies heavily on control. The Belarusian army has traditionally been kept out of politics, at least on the surface. Lukashenko made sure that military leadership was carefully selected, monitored, and rewarded for loyalty. Promotions were often based not just on competence, but on political reliability. This system worked for years, keeping the army firmly aligned with the presidency. But societies change, and so do institutions. The soldiers and officers of today are not the same as those of the 1990s. Many have access to outside information, social media, and alternative narratives about power and legitimacy. They see what is happening in neighboring countries and understand the risks of being used against their own people. One major turning point came during periods of internal unrest. When protests erupted in Belarus, the regime relied heavily on police and security services to suppress demonstrations. The army, however, was placed in an uncomfortable position. Being ordered to confront civilians can deeply affect morale and loyalty, especially when soldiers sympathize with public grievances. There were indications that not everyone within the armed forces was comfortable with these expectations. While the army did not openly rebel, silence and hesitation can be just as meaningful as open defiance. For an authoritarian system, unquestioning obedience is essential, and anything less can be interpreted as a threat. Another factor complicating Lukashenko's control is Belarus's geopolitical situation. The country is closely tied to Russia, both militarily and economically. Joint exercises, shared defense strategies, and political pressure from Moscow have shaped the Belarusian military for years. This relationship creates loyalty conflicts for officers who may feel caught between national duty and external influence. Some military figures may worry that Belarus is losing its independence or being drawn too deeply into conflicts that do not serve its national interest. These concerns can quietly erode trust in leadership, especially if decisions appear to benefit foreign allies more than the country itself. Economic pressures also play a role. Sanctions, isolation, and economic stagnation affect not only civilians but military families as well. Lower living standards, uncertainty about the future, and limited opportunities can reduce motivation and loyalty among soldiers. An army is not immune to the struggles of the society it comes from. Lukashenko has responded to these challenges with familiar tactics. He has publicly emphasized loyalty, warned against betrayal, and reshuffled military leadership. Such moves are meant to reinforce control, but they can also increase anxiety and suspicion within the ranks. Constant loyalty tests rarely build genuine trust. The use of fear as a governing tool has limits. While it can enforce obedience in the short term, it often weakens institutions over time. Officers who fear making mistakes may avoid initiative, while soldiers who feel unvalued may mentally disengage from their duties. This creates a fragile structure that looks strong from the outside but is weak within. Another issue is generational change. Younger officers may not share the same personal loyalty to Lukashenko that older commanders developed over decades. They entered service in a different era with different expectations and values. For them, professionalism and national interest may matter more than personal allegiance to a single leader. The challenge to Lukashenko's authority does not necessarily mean an imminent coup or open rebellion. In fact, the most dangerous threats for authoritarian leaders often come quietly. A lack of enthusiasm, slow compliance, or passive resistance can significantly reduce a regime's ability to act decisively in a crisis. This situation puts Lukashenko in a difficult position. If he pushes the army too hard, he risks provoking resentment or resistance. If he appears too weak, he may encourage further challenges to his authority. Balancing fear and loyalty becomes increasingly difficult as trust erodes. International observers are watching closely. A divided or hesitant army can change calculations both inside and outside the country. Allies may question the regime's stability, while opponents may see an opportunity for change. Even rumors of military dissatisfaction can have powerful psychological effects. At the same time, it is important to avoid exaggeration. The Belarusian army has not openly turned against Lukashenko. The command structure remains intact, and there is no confirmed evidence of coordinated opposition at the top levels. However, stability built purely on fear and control is never permanent. History shows that when armies begin to question political leadership, outcomes can be unpredictable. Sometimes it leads to reform, sometimes to repression, and sometimes to sudden collapse. Much depends on how leaders respond to early warning signs. Lukashenko's long rule has been defined by his ability to neutralize threats before they grow. The question now is whether this strategy still works in a changing environment. The tools that secured loyalty in the past may be less effective against modern pressures and evolving attitudes. The army's role is central because it represents the ultimate guarantor of state power. If confidence between political leadership and military institutions weakens, the entire system becomes unstable. Even if nothing dramatic happens, the relationship may never fully return to what it once was. For ordinary Belarusians, this power struggle is deeply significant. The army's stance could influence the country's future direction, whether toward continued authoritarianism, gradual reform, or deeper dependence on external powers. The military's choices, even silent ones, matter greatly. In the end, Lukashenko's authority being challenged by the army is less about a single event and more about a process. It reflects accumulated pressures, shifting loyalties, and growing uncertainty within the state. These developments remind us that no leader, no matter how strong, is immune to change. As the situation continues to evolve, one thing is clear. Authority that relies solely on control must constantly defend itself. When the institutions meant to uphold that authority begin to question it, even quietly, the balance of power starts to shift. That's why this issue deserves close attention. It is not just a story about Belarus, but a broader lesson about power, legitimacy, and the fragile relationship between leaders and the forces that sustain them. Thank you for watching, and we'll continue to follow this story as it develops.